Okay, thanks for sticking with us. Now let's talk about the Visual KPI Designer in the next level of detail, which is just a tour of all the things you see on the screen here and a few of the first core patterns that you might want to understand about the designer itself. Now you saw me open the Visual KPI Designer, which opened Excel, then opened the Document Actions pane or the Visual KPI Designer add-in. And then once that was open, it connected to that server. So let's talk about what we have on the screen here. And I'm going to start with stuff that's not in the Visual KPI Designer, and that's everything in Excel up here. Now, a lot of this is still very useful for the Visual KPI Designer, but there's a few things that you want to understand that aren't useful. Number one, when you want to save things, you're not going to use the Save button in the top of Excel because that's really saving a spreadsheet. And while the designer, while you have it open, looks and acts and smells and tastes like a spreadsheet, it's actually not. What it's doing when you open something and work on it is it's pulling information from the Visual KPI server and the Visual KPI database and unpackaging it here in this spreadsheet-like metaphor, letting you work on it, letting you make changes, letting you create things. And then when you click Save on the right-hand side over here in the Visual KPI add-in, it's packaging that back up and it's putting it in the Visual KPI server for use at runtime. So the Excel part is not used while your server is running. Excel is not part of the solution when just your users are accessing data and using it on their phone and their browsers and things like that. It's only used at design time, and it has this unique relationship with the Visual KPI server and its database. So it's very important to know that all the things that you want to do to interact with the designer are mostly over here in the add-in. And you can still use things like sorting and filtering and deleting rows and things like that in Excel, and we'll show you a few of those as we go through the training. But it's important to understand that saving and opening things and all that happens over here in the add-in. So that's the Excel part. Now let's talk about the specific document actions pane here or the Visual KPI Designer add-in. First thing you'll notice at the top, besides the logo, is what version you're running. This needs to match your server, and if there's an upgrade available, you'll notice a little notice here that you can upgrade. Now, just because you notice the upgrade notice here doesn't mean you should just go grab it, because if your server hasn't been upgraded as well, then you don't want to have a more modern version. Some versions will work with different things, but if a schema changes in the database, which is not something you need to understand, but basically it means if we make a major enough change to the server, then the designer won't work. If you try to open a designer against a version of the server that is a mismatch, it will give you an error, and then you need to go make sure you have the right version of the designer. Now going down a little bit, you can see that this is where we connected to a particular site, and in my case I have access to a whole bunch of Visual KPI instances all over the world. Yours may just be one or a few of these. And this is everything about connecting it, so it's instance connections. The second one is one you'll use all the time, and this is just view website. You'll see if I click it, I'm going to get another another instance of my browser here that's just gone to the same page as the other one, or just to the default view of it. Okay, so that's how you access it. It's like a preview. I like to keep it open in another browser window all the time while I'm working. So that's that piece. It also shows me who's logged in here. Now there's a whole bunch of tools here which I'm going to save for later, but I want to highlight a few things that are common with what you see in the designer and what you see on the user experience here in the browser in the back end or on your phone. One is these tabs: groups, KPIs, charts, and tables. Right here you'll see again groups, KPIs, charts, and tables. These are the various types of objects, or what we call the core objects of the system. Groups being the hierarchy, KPIs being all those metrics that have status and meaning and color that are visualized in many ways, charts being additional visualization types that are created by the administrator or the person using the designer here, and then tables as well for rectangular data. Lots of different chart types. KPIs are pretty stable, and tables also are pretty uniform objects. Okay. Now, before I get too far, I want to talk about some of the concepts of how this works. So everything you see down here applies to everything that's going to be open over here. Now, I haven't opened anything yet, and I've done that on purpose, But again, saving is only going to save what I can see here. Even if I've removed things from the sheet here, if I save, it's not going to do that, or if I delete things, etc. Each of these tabs, if I open something, is going to open a new tab, just like you're used to in Excel. You may have a whole bunch of tabs here open at the end. Okay. The gear is where we will go through all the site-wide settings, and there's an entire section of the course on that, so I won't do that just yet. And then down here is this session record. This will just tell you that the actions you're taking have actually happened with the server. So if I save something, or if I open something, or make a change, it's gonna be recorded here, so that if I'm wondering if I actually did hit that button, that's where it's gonna tell me. And lastly, there's a few links to some other information, or where you can get support, or to our documentation. So that's a little bit of the user interface tour. I didn't go through everything yet because a lot of them are dependent on what's open or what piece of, or what you're looking at. Okay. So with that, let's move on to the next section and talk about the site-wide settings.